rights issues in focus as Southeast Asian leaders gather for the ASEAN summit. Home Affairs Minister Peter Dutton accused of racism over his stance on white South African farmers. Too tough to call, no clear frontrunner on the eve of the South Australian election. And tropical cyclone Marcus upgraded as it heads towards the Northern Territory coast. Good evening. Leaders from across Southeast Asia are in Sydney today for the start of the ASEAN-Australia Special Summit. They're here to discuss cooperation across the region, but the summit won't be without controversy. Among the guests is Aung San Suu Kyi, the head of the Myanmar government, and the Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Sen.
The Prime Minister was pressed on human rights, in particular when it came to Hun Sen, the Cambodian leader, and also Aung San Suu Kyi, as you mentioned. Now, both are expected to face protests over the coming days from the diaspora communities here in Australia. In particular, Hun Sen faces allegations that he's essentially turned into something of a strongman, locking up both journalists and political opponents, whereas Aung San Suu Kyi has taken a somewhat unfortunate trajectory from being an icon of democracy and hope to someone who's presiding over what the UN calls ethnic cleansing in the northwest of her country. So plenty of controversy around some of the leaders coming here to Sydney. Malcolm Turnbull was asked today, well, what will Australia say and what will ASEAN say about those human rights abuses? Will Australia and will ASEAN take a stand? And Malcolm Turnbull made it pretty clear that he would stick with ASEAN's core principle, which is essentially don't meddle in your neighbours' affairs. Traditionally, the summit has been very reticent about making sort of bold declarations on human rights or criticising anyone on that front, in part because the organisation remains in some ways quite fragile. Now, the Prime Minister said he would make representations to those leaders. We understand in his meeting with Hun Sen he did raise the importance of democracy, but he made it clear he wouldn't be using a public loudhailer to do so. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
The engagement that we have in our region is a frank engagement with all of the countries in the region, and you've made some sweeping generalisations there. I just want to say that we approach ASEAN with the greatest of respect.
The two Australians involved in a deadly explosion at a shooting range in Cambodia were tourists and not part of an official Australian military training operation as claimed by Cambodian authorities. The ABC understands that no official military training was scheduled in that area and that the men were tourists visiting a shooting range run by the Cambodian military for profit. An Australian and a Cambodian man were killed in the blast that also injured 3 others, including another Australian. The Home Affairs Minister has sparked a diplomatic row with South Africa after suggesting white farmers in the country are being persecuted and in need of protection. South Africa has demanded Peter Dutton retract the remarks and hauled in Australia's High Commissioner to express its displeasure.
What Peter Dutton has essentially done is wade into what is for South Africa a fairly charged issue around race politics, and he appears to have weighed in by his own words after watching a number of TV stories and reading a number of articles, and made these comments that the South African farmers are persecuted and that he's looking at whether we can give them some kind of special visa category, whether a civilised country like Australia can give them special protection. And it's those comments that have really upset the South Africans. It appears that Mr Dutton has done this at the urging of some of his colleagues, certainly on the right of the party. There have been a number of social media posts from a number of his colleagues urging him to take action, and certainly saying that they've been lobbying him for some time to respond to this issue. But it seems that largely his response is based on having read those few stories rather than any kind of advice from his department or the authorities.
And has Peter Dutton himself responded to South Africa's criticism of his comments yet?
Look, the only comment that he's made today is that he stands by what he said, that he remains concerned and that he is looking at whether any special visa category can be created. He's exploring options. If we have a look at the Foreign Minister Julie Bishop's language, she was a little softer when asked about it. She said her and the Home Affairs Minister are discussing if anything needs to change. And certainly if we look to his other colleagues, Michael McCormack, the new leader of the National Party, the new Deputy Prime Minister of Australia, he seemed to be a little lukewarm to his colleagues' comments. Let's take a listen.
Peter Dutton has made those comments in good faith, and I appreciate it's a delicate situation there, but I think it's a little bit rich to go always asking ministers to retract comments. So, as I say, he made those comments in good faith, and Peter Dutton is doing an outstanding job in the immigration portfolio.
Certainly some of the criticism has been that white farmers are at no greater risk than any other South African, and certainly looking at some of the reports and figures around, it seems to be that the general consensus is that the level of violence there is no greater, even though some lobby groups say it is.
Today was the last day of campaigning in South Australia ahead of what's looking like the most unpredictable state election in living memory. It's a three-cornered contest between the incumbent Labor Party, the opposition Liberal Party and Nick Xenophon's SA Best Party.
Jay Weatherill has picked an interesting location for his final campaign pitch. He's gone back to the location of that famous or infamous shirt-fronting incident between him and the Federal Energy Minister, Josh Frydenberg. You'll remember Josh Frydenberg showed up to a press conference. Jay Weatherill basically attacked him on some of the criticisms that Josh Frydenberg and the coalition in Canberra had been levelling at the state government over their energy policy. Labor are even selling mugs with a screenshot of that exchange as part of their party fundraising efforts ahead of the election. Jay Weatherill says he never planned to launch that attack against Josh Frydenberg on the day, but Josh Frydenberg had it coming.
I was always going to remind him about his remarks, but as it went on, I became more and more angry about the way in which he talked down South Australia, and I wanted to stand up for South Australia because I believe and love this state.
Stephen Marshall, the Liberal leader, has been out campaigning this morning, and he says that voters need to shun Nick Xenophon and his SA Best team, because if they were to vote for him, it would simply be another 4 years here in South Australia of a Labor government.
He's saying to the people of South Australia, well, trust me, after the election, I'll decide who is in the best position to form a government. We asked the question, so if the Liberal Party has more votes, will you go with the Liberal Party? He refuses to rule out doing a deal with Jay Weatherill. A vote for Nick Xenophon is a vote for another 4 years of Labor government in South Australia, and that would be a disaster.
Nick Xenophon has very much kept his cards very close to his chest, while Stephen Marshall is saying that a Liberal government would not negotiate with Nick Xenophon. Nick Xenophon is saying that he wants to wait to see exactly how these results fall tomorrow night, and as counting continues in the following days, to figure out exactly what will be the best outcome for South Australia in the event that his votes are crucial.
There's a whole range of factors, but we will be an uncompromising watchdog for South Australia's interests, willing to work with both. Stephen Marshall may have shut the door on me for now, but if he won't talk to me, I'll give Vicky Chapman a ring, the Deputy Liberal leader, on election night.
Nick Xenophon ending Matt Doran's report. Darwin residents have been told to start preparing for Tropical Cyclone Marcus. The Bureau of Meteorology says bad weather could begin to intensify as soon as midnight tonight. Marcus is now a Category 2.
In our last update, we were talking a lot about the sun in the sky and the blue skies. Well, now there's been a real change in the air, and not that long ago, the Bureau of Meteorology upgraded the watch to a warning for a large part of the Northern Territory's northwest coast. This system is already dumping heavy rainfalls on islands to the north of us, and tonight the system is expected to hit us as Tropical Cyclone Marcus as a Category 1 cyclone somewhere between midnight and the early hours of the morning. That system is expected to stick around. We're going to have flash flooding. We'll have strong winds, 95 kilometres per hour, until about Saturday evening. So that update from the BOM was issued not that long ago, and here's a little bit of what they had to say to us.
The impact of the cyclone have already started affecting some areas of the north coast. We've had rainfall totals during the last 24 hours of 100 millimetres plus. and in fact we can expect to see those same totals during the next 24 hours as well. The gale force winds that are associated with the cyclone are expected to impact the northern coastal communities from around mid-afternoon today and to continue right through tonight into the early hours of tomorrow morning.
And Diana, it seems like it was going to have been a busy weekend in the Northern Territory, but that's been disrupted.
Yeah, definitely. This is one of the Territory's biggest weekends for sport. We've got the Tiwi Grand Final on the Tiwi Islands. Yesterday that was postponed to next week. I'm standing here at Marara Stadium, Darwin's main stadium, and the Grand Final that was supposed to be held here on Saturday has been postponed to Sunday, pending the outcome of this cyclone. Palmerston Council, it's a satellite city here. They were expected to hold their local elections this weekend. That's been postponed by a week. And even St Patrick's Day, the celebrations have also been called off here. So definitely a lot of disruptions here. We've got supermarkets beginning to stock up with their bulk food, and we're expecting a big rush at the supermarkets as everyone knocks off work this afternoon and begins to prepare for an unpredictable 24 hours.
The Australian women's cricket team has clinched its one-day series against India with a 60-run win in Game 2. Elise Perry starred with the bat scoring an unbeaten 70 off as many balls as the Australians compiled 287 from their 50 overs. Australia also had the answers with the ball dismissing India for just 227.
We definitely don't think that India have been underwhelming. I think they're a very good side with some world-class players. I'd probably like to give us a little bit of credit that we've played some really good cricket.
The tourists will be looking for a series whitewash when Game 3 is played on Sunday. Thanks for your company here on ABC News this afternoon. I'm Kirsten Aiken. Stay with us. The Drum is up next.